Hi everyone, I'm John from HTN and welcome to this webinar today titled Streamlining Patient Care, Strategies to Reduce Follow-ups and Increase Clinical Productivity. So for the session today, I'm really pleased to welcome a panel joining us. And so I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Damien, a consultant paediatric ophthalmologist at Alder Children's Hospital, Leila Brown, Associate Director of Digital Transformation at Alder Children's Hospital, Dr. Rachel Robinson, Consultant Dermatologist and Clinical Lead Dermatology at Harrogate and District NHS Foundation Trust, and Peter Hansell, CEO and co-founder of Isla Health. So thank you to the panel for joining us today. So over the course of the webinar, we will hear from our panelists and ask them to share examples of how they have introduced digital tools to reduce face-to-face follow-up appointments. We will hear what they did and the benefits and the impact that that has had, and we'll hear their learnings and any practical advice to share with you in the audience as well. So the data suggests that clinical productivity is and remains at 11% below those pre-pandemic levels. And we know health and care faces challenges such as rising readmissions and significant patient treatment backlog. So we're here today to learn how those issues have been addressed by Alder Children's Hospital and Harrogate and District NHS Foundation Trust, and how they partnered with Isla Health in terms of reducing those face-to-face appointments and enhancing clinical visibility. So that's the focus of our webinar today. I'm also keen to hear from you in the audience. So if you have any questions, please type them into the chat, or if there's anything that you would like to share or contribute, type them into the chat and we'll keep an eye on those as they come in, and we have time for a planned Q&A towards the end of the session as well. And finally, on housekeeping, this session will be recorded and the HTN team will be doing a write-up as well, so you can read or watch it back at a later date or share it with your colleagues. So, right, let's get started. So my first question will be to our panel to provide a wider introduction, if you can please, in terms of yourself and your work and experiences, and if you could explain how implementing strategies and technologies has impacted clinical productivity and overall efficiency, and tell us a bit about your work around that. So Damien, hi, can I start with you please for that?
Sure, no problem. Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm Damien. I am a pediatric ophthalmologist in Alder Children's Hospital, which is a tertiary level hospital in Liverpool in northwest of England. So my work is mostly with children with ophthalmology problems, visual problems, eye conditions, and we get referrals from the GP, the community optometrists, other clinicians. We see about 17 to 18,000 patients a year in our clinics, but increasingly we are now moving things to more patients to a virtual system or a virtual-like system with support from our allied health professional and non-medical staff colleagues. So regards to your question, so how we've been trying to improve efficiency, it's twofold in clinics. So ophthalmology is very outpatient heavy. Most of our work is we see patients in the outpatients coupled with some with surgery in day cases. In the clinics, however, what we're trying to do is it's twofold. We're trying to increase the capacity of the patients that we can see in existing clinics, and then also to tackle the backlog of patients who are on the extremely long waiting list. So in terms of how to increase capacity in existing clinics, we have been really working hard on optimizing the clinical decision-making time. So clinicians are a sacred resource, right? Like the biggest expense in the NHS really goes to its staff. So we have to think of strategies to improve our ability to and speed up our ability to make clinical decisions. So Isla as a digital solution allows us to have more digital arms to multitask better, and we are able to move consults to a more asynchronous style, which opens up flexibility. It allows us to work from home, allows us to receive information about the patient at any time, not just in the traditional model of a clinic, where when a doctor sees a patient in the clinic, that they are concentrating on that patient. They see a very finite number of patients in that session, and then the patient goes. So that's actually a very resource heavy endeavor, because patients travel into the hospital. The doctors have to be physically there, and our concentration really is on that one patient at one time. So yes, that is the traditional model. It's still very valid, of course. We still do that, or we are still definitely still doing that. But it takes up there's only so many patients we can see at one time. Where Isla opens up the options for us to make quicker clinical decisions, because we can receive asynchronous data from these patients while they're at home or they're on waiting lists. So as part of the strategies, we are increasingly digitizing a lot of our data collection. So we're trying to move things into our EPRs. We are collecting data that previously were not structured, and we're bringing it into solutions like Isla, such as photographs of their clinical condition, and forms which would document their clinical progress over time. Historically, where we see a patient, will be like, how are you? How have you been doing? And we'll write down on our notes how they've been doing. And then this often isn't documented very well. But Isla, because you're getting the patients to collect this data for you at home while they're waiting, the data would be there long term, and you can always refer back to it at any point. And the data collection is done when the system pushes out a message to them, and the patients collect the data at their own time. So you don't really need a clinician or even an admin staff to be sending these forms out on the regular basis. It's all done in the background. So we save a lot of time and a lot of manpower. We are increasing a lot of dependence on our allied health professional colleagues, like orthoptists and optometrists in the hospitals, to help us with our clinic. And Isla helps to bridge a bit of that communication. So they are all now trained to be able to use Isla as a software to collect data on our behalf. So we can look at the photographs or the forms if needed before the patients even see us face to face. We have a consultant-led fail-safe system that runs all the time, runs very regularly, and what they do is the consultants are constantly looking at the waiting list to make sure that it doesn't go too crazy. And if something is breaching, that will be addressed very quickly by a consultant colleague. And Isla as a tool allows us to spontaneously collect information if needed at that time, without needing to bring the patient into clinic. So we use that as if we triage the patient, for example, and we think, we do need a little bit more information, we can use Isla to obtain that information and decide that patient needs to come into clinic. So yeah, these are just some of the examples how we've been using Isla in clinic.
Fantastic, thank you for that. And Rachel, can I come to you next for a wider introduction, and can we hear about your work and experiences at Harrogate and District, and how you've helped to reduce follow-up appointments or improve productivity, and anything around that, please?
Hi, I'm Rachel Robinson. I'm a consultant dermatologist. I'm the clinical lead in our department. And I was tasked a few years back now with trying to improve our image collection for dermatology. As you can imagine, dermatology is a hugely visual specialty, and we use a lot of images. Back in those days, we were taking pictures with a normal camera and then printing out each image and then sticking it in the paper notes with some sellotape. So you can imagine that some of those would fall out, we'd lose the images, we didn't get great quality images, and it was an issue for our department. So I was tasked with changing this, looked at various ways of how we could do that, and we now have a digital image system which is exactly provided what we needed, but has gone beyond that, and it's been beneficial for many reasons. So first of all, we take an image every time we see a patient in clinic with their skin lesion. It helps us identify the correct site surgery. We can mark up the images to make certain, because some patients may have 2 lesions on their scalp, 3 or even 4 sometimes, and you want to make sure that you're getting the correct site excised by the in the surgeon. So we use it for that. Then we started to realize that we could use it by interacting with patients, and this is where things have really improved. So patients get concerned about their skin surgery wounds. And we used to just say to the patients, ring us up, come and see us if you've got a problem with your wound. Now they still ring us up if they've got a concern, but then when they ring them up, they get sent a link via their text to send us a photograph of their wound. This then is automatically put onto the system and it links with our EPR. Then our nurse who's responsible for wounds that day will then ring back the patient having looked at the image and can say to them, oh, don't worry, this is fine, this is just inflammation from the stitches, or actually, yes, this looks like we need to see you, can you come in at 10 o'clock or something. So it streamlines that clinic so patients don't necessarily need to come. That has made a big difference for elderly patients who do get worried about wounds, and with dissolvable stitches, which we're using more and more now, that does cause quite a lot of inflammation, so understandably they're concerned. So we can reassure them, we can bring them in, we can streamline our clinics further. So the next thing we've looked at is automation. So a bit how Damien was saying about patients collecting data. So when we have urgent 2-week wait clinic, now the patients get sent before the appointment a link to send in a picture of the skin lesion they're concerned about, and also they fill in a form, and the form has got all the history, all the questions that we need. It also has a little section in about if they need skin surgery, should they have a pacemaker, or something that might influence how we do surgery. And so when they come to that clinic, it streamlines the clinic. The clinic runs quicker because when they come in, I can then immediately say to the patient, oh, hello, Mr. Smith, you've got a lesion on your arm that I'm looking at today. Can I get you to sit over here? We're just going to take some updated images where we take a dermatoscopic image and a better focused image, and it gets rid of all the, hello, Mr. Smith, what are we talking about today? How long have you had this on your arm? He might say in the old days, oh, I think it started about 3 months ago. And then his wife cuts in, no, I think it was 4 months. Don't you remember we went to Spain? Blah, blah, blah. So it gets rid of all these little bits, which are great, but we've got a big problem with 2-week wait referrals. We've got fast track referrals everywhere across the country. So by using this automation and by able to also get the patient's image, it might be out of focus, that doesn't matter, it gives me an idea of what I'm looking at before they come in, and you've just got that visual idea. I'll take a better image when they come in, and so we've been able to increase our capacity by doing that. We can easily see 10% more patients, and we're working on whether we can get that higher and higher for those type of clinics. So that's what we do in the clinics, and that's where we're using Isla, but it's more than that. So one of our registrars said, oh, next hospital I go to, I'm not going to be able to manage without Isla, because the registrars and middle grade doctors that we have instant access to images, and they can come and discuss a case with me, and I might be in my office and I can just get up the image instantly on the computer. I don't have to be waiting for anything. The patient could be in the room, they've had their image done, and I can see it literally as real time. So we can then discuss the image, we can discuss the patient, and then I don't need to get up and go into the clinic because the registrar's got a management plan. And that also streamlines, because as soon as a consultant goes into a clinic, oh, while you're here, there's about this or about that, or oh, I saw you 6 months ago, or how are you, or whatever, because I had a broken leg, all that sort of thing. So it's nice to be able to interact with the patients, but also with our middle grade staff. And then the other people we interact with Isla is in our MDT. So in our MDT, we have some big screens, and we put Isla up so everybody in the MDT can see the picture. So if it's a scalp and we're going to refer to Max Fax are in our MDT can say, oh yeah, I can see, yeah, that needs a graft, that needs a definite this amount of appointment, and so they can then know what sort of appointment to give that patient before they come. So we're interacting with lots of different areas, people, patients, staff, and it's evolving all the time. We're getting the automation with the 2-week waits has worked so well. We're now moving into automation for our acne clinics, which is going to add more information, because acne patients like to have a lot of information, so we can then also give them the information back via Isla, via links. So we really have progressed a lot. I'd like to hope that my initial brief that I was given a couple of years ago has been ticked, if not double ticked.
Absolutely. It sounds like it has. It's fantastic. So thank you for that,
Yeah.
Rachel. And Leila, can I come to you next, please, in terms of a wider introduction? Could you take us through your experiences around this topic, and perhaps from an operational perspective, a digital transformation perspective as well?
Yeah, of course, no problem. So my name is Leila Brown, and I'm the Associate Director for Digital Transformation at Alder. So I look after the sort of programs and projects team, and also look after the sort of systems team within the trust. So we do a lot of work, sort of keeping the lights on and keeping our current systems going, but also trying to introduce sort of new technologies to bring benefits, obviously, to our staff, our patients, and our families. So Rachel and Damien have probably covered the sort of kind of visual record and questionnaire elements really well. So I'll talk about a slightly different use case. So we've got a project ongoing at the moment at Alder alongside Isla around wait lists. So we are contacting families or patients, depending on their age, who are waiting for appointments, and validating through Isla whether they still need an appointment. So it's obviously, everybody probably knows this is a nationally mandated requirement. We've got to contact patients every 12 weeks that are on our waiting list, and we need to be communicating with them. And as everybody, that everybody's stretched, and it's a challenge, really. So we worked quite recently on a pilot with Isla within surgery, to do this validation work and actually reach out to patients and families and say, you're on the waiting list. Do you still need an appointment? And we've just done a couple of kind of examples, I suppose, so far, and used, I suppose, lent on the clinicians who we know are normally quite sort of good with tech and ambitious with it and things like that. And we've seen really positive results actually as a result of it. So in terms of the proof of concept, I think the last lot of data I had, and again, this is quite a recent pilot, we had over sort of 200 families get in touch and say we don't need our appointments at all. On the flip side, it was useful because we also have families get in contact to say we really need our appointment, and actually it helped us prioritize as well who are the most urgent cases were. So if you think about over 200 appointments, these could be 10-minute, 20-minute, half-an-hour appointments. It doesn't take a lot of maths to sort of equate that into the amount of kind of clinical time that's then released back into the organization, which is brilliant. In terms of patient benefits and family benefits, we're not asking patients and families to come all the way to trust from wherever, sit down for 5 minutes to say actually we don't need this anymore and go home, which does happen. And then more widely, obviously, it's supporting the sort of national initiatives to try and reduce our wait list down. So it's been a really positive pilot so far. It's being replicated now across surgery. So tongue tie is a big one for us in terms of patients who often come in and then actually we don't need to see them. So tongue tie is the next on the list, but just a sort of another operational example, I suppose. And I think one of the things from our point of view is when we were discussing originally doing it, we felt like it was quite a brave thing to do, to actually reach out to sort of young people and their families and say, do you need to still come here? But we're having to think of new ways to do things, because actually as we all know, the old models that can get us so far, but we're in a really difficult time. And actually it's been really positive. We haven't had negative feedback from families around the initiative, and actually a lot of them are really grateful to be contacted, to say yes, we do still need our appointment, to be contacted and say no, we're okay, and not get an appointment, or to really kind of home in on the fact that they need to be a priority. So it's just a bit of a different example of how we've used Isla to support us operationally.
Fantastic. Thank you, Leila. And Pete, can I come to you finally for an introduction, hear about some of your experiences and from a technology perspective in relation to this subject?
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks everybody. It's always great to hear the stories and the impact that we're collectively having. So lovely to meet you all. I'm Pete Hansell, CEO and co-founder at Isla. I'm actually an engineer by training, to my shame, when surrounded by clinicians. But I suppose I find working to improve the health system much more personally fulfilling than engineering. So I spent the majority of my career in various roles in technology and transformation, kind of around the NHS, until 5 years ago when I launched Isla. So I thought I would just sort of start by clarifying really what we mean when we talk about reducing follow-up appointments, because I suppose we've very much adopted NHS language there, and internally everyone knows what that means. But I suppose the clarification is this really shouldn't be and isn't about stopping patients from getting regular input into their health conditions. It's actually kind of quite the opposite of that. So what we're much more trying to do here is make sure that we're working within a structure where we can really optimize the way that we're receiving information from patients about their conditions and their symptoms. And if we think about it, for the majority of conditions, it's really quite unlikely that the best way to understand how that's developing and changing is to bring a patient back in regularly every 3 months for a kind of increasingly time-pressured 15 or 20-minute interaction with a clinician. And if a patient's condition is deteriorating kind of 1 month after the last hospital visit, then actually we really don't want that person sitting isolated, worried about their health for the next 2 months until that next scheduled intervention. So I think we can be much more kind of rigorous and thorough in the way that we think about this entire model. And really that's our kind of overarching aim with Isla. We want to modernize this process and move to a system where we have, in truth, much more regular inputs actually from patients into the clinical team, and much more of a sort of empowerment and ownership on patients to be able to submit updated information about their condition. And so I think really that's the key value. And when you apply that model to a large cohort of patients, what you quite quickly find is that there are some patients who probably need much more regular kind of follow-up input, and they're not currently getting it. And there are many patients who don't need to be on a scheduled, synchronous process of face-to-face review with a clinician. And so the key thing is to really understand who those people are in both those categories. And so how do we do that with Isla? Well, I think the real key value is that through the information that we collect, and we've heard from Rachel and Damien on, and later on some of those formats, but predominantly at the moment, images, videos, sound recordings, and very sophisticated prompts, which kind of branch to really dive into the specific data points that we need to capture from patients at a personalized level. We can actually go a very long way to presenting quite a complete summary of the way a patient's condition is changing. And as Rach said, dermatology is a great example because it's a highly visual specialty, but actually we started there because what we've seen is that so much of what we're trying to understand about a patient's condition is rooted in kind of that visual. So if we can create a longitudinal understanding of the way that something is visually changing, that goes a long way to being able to make the right clinical decision. And so, John, the second part of that question was about how it's affected clinical productivity. I think we really see, and I suppose our key metric that we're trying to impact is patient throughput. And then the knock-on effect of that is that we can begin to reduce waiting times, which is obviously fantastic for all of us as patients, but also a key national level priority. And we've heard some great examples from the team already. Just another couple, and we'll focus on acute, but it's worth saying that the same exact principle applies in the community setting, and we've done previous webinars to sort of dive into some of that. But another nice example which jumps to mind, we've worked quite extensively with the burns team in both Nottingham University Hospitals and Chelsea and Westminster. Chelsea is a regional burns centre, so they have quite a large catchment area. There was an external evaluation done there to understand impact on throughput and RTT, and we moved from 67 days average waiting pre the implementation in burn service to 24 days post implementation, and so that's a month and a half average waiting time reduced for patients who need input into their burns care. And the key thing there is exactly as described. It's about moving from regimented synchronous review points where a lot of the time is used up in the humorous conversation that Rachel described, or in sort of extracting bits of information from people. We can move all of that upstream and get patients and family members and school teachers and care home staff to be inputting that, and then we can use the clinical time in as valuable a way as possible to really streamline and make clinical decisions. So that's really at the heart of what we're trying to do with our digital pathway platform and technology.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pete, and thanks everyone for insights into your projects. So we'll go to some questions now. So if anybody in the audience has any questions that you'd like to ask the audience, type them into the chat and we'll go through them over the next half an hour. I'll kick us off with a couple. Damien, can I come to you first, please? Keen to hear about your project and what parents or carers have perhaps said. What's some of the feedback been? What has been their experiences? And also in terms of patient outcomes, have you noticed a positive change in terms of patient outcomes as a result of this project?
Thank you. Yeah, so parents generally have no problems with what we are implementing here. This is because we are seeing them quicker. In the past, they would be on a waiting list, unsure of what's happening, whether their referral is being actioned, or and where they are on the waiting list. Isla allows us to shorten those gaps, and if they qualify for a virtual consultation, they would receive one. So, I mean, people have important things to do in their lives. They don't just want to be on the waiting list. Families have important things to do, and kids have to go to school, etc. So the less disruptive we can, the better. So we've had very easy, parents are adopted to this system very easily. Most parents are reasonably savvy with the tech needed, and it's not difficult to use. And in scenarios where they are not comfortable with it, we have an easy way to revert back to the traditional model. So it's very forgiving. The primary care, for example, has been using these systems for a much longer time, and we're just a bit slower to adopt in secondary care, perhaps because of the different specialties that we have in hospitals. So it's been hard to have one system that fits everyone. But Isla is particularly good at adopting, I think, to different specialties. It's a very fluid system, and it's very open to change. So, and it can create bespoke functions, and certainly the forms are all it's customized based on your specialty. So the experience has been very very good with the families. Regards to clinical outcomes, so yeah, we've been able to use Isla to improve the triaging process, for example. So we get the right patients into the right clinic at the right time. This means that patients who the undifferentiated patients in the past would be on the waiting list until we see them in clinic, and then we realize that they may have had a squint in the eye, or they may have a cataract that we missed. But Isla, for example, we can use a photograph to differentiate between the patients who have a real squint, a turn in the eye, versus the ones who don't have a real squint. And when we look at the photograph, it's very easy for us to identify those patients, so we can bring them forward to a clinic much sooner. And some other examples are like when we have communication from A&E doctors or other consultants outside the hospital, where they have a child with an infection or an inflamed eye, and we can get very quick information, lots of information in a very quick manner, in order to be able to triage that. We don't need much. It's just information to be able to triage, because a lot of times we are making decisions we're making a binary decision, right? Yes, this patient needs treatment, or no, it doesn't need treatment, or yes, it needs to be, we need to do this investigation, or no, it doesn't need this investigation. And we are looking for those metrics that qualify the patient to get those investigations, those treatments, so we can actually make a lot of clinical decisions quicker. And as a result, patients have been having their investigations or been listed for surgery a lot sooner.
Excellent. Thank you, Damien. And we've had a question in the chat. So Rachel, can I come to you for this, please? It says, have you reduced the length of your individual urgent 2-week clinic appointments as a result of the project?
Yes, so how we book our appointments is because they're normally big clinics, they're like super clinics. So the patients, we have a number of patients in the clinic. So we've been able to increase the number of patients in that clinic as opposed to individual clinic times. But we will see more patients in that clinic by using the automation process, yeah, by about 10%.
Fantastic, thank you. And the next question is a technical one. So can I come to you, Pete, for this one, please? Is there any integration between Isla and your respective clinical systems? And could you explain that for us, please?
Yeah, have to. I suppose there's both the specific way to answer the question, which perhaps I'll kind of let the others jump in on. More generally, we aim for integration in all of our different programs with different NHS trusts. That's possible always to varying degrees. So with the sort of more mature EPRs, typically it's possible to have a sort of bi-directional interface where we can pull all of the patients automatically into Isla, and then any information that we need to, we can push automatically back into the EPR. And there's some nice examples of where we can actually embed the whole Isla interface into a system such as Cerner, or Oracle Cerner as it is now, to avoid clinicians having to jump between different screens and different platforms in order to get the information they need. So that's kind of the gold standard that we're aiming for. And we've built those interfaces with System 1, with EMIS, with Cerner. We're working on that with Epic. We've built that with Meditech. We're integrating with Rio at the moment. So we're sort of doing our best to get to that point with all other partners. And then there's always specifics underneath that. So in some cases, people have different instances of EPRs, which are then difficult and might have restrictions. So there's always a sort of detailed conversation to have about the extent to which we can integrate. But certainly that's the ambition for all of our projects.
Fantastic, thank you. Leila, can I come to you next, please? In terms of any learnings or advice from this project, if somebody on the call was about to embark on something similar, what would you say to them? Or perhaps what would you have liked to have known when you started this project?
Yeah, no worries. So I think probably there's a few things that I think probably made it a success in terms of lessons for us. So and I know it's the common one, but I think from a multidisciplinary team point of view, we couldn't have done it if we'd not had any one of those teams involved right from the start of this. So clinical, digital, operational teams, buy-in from our execs, etc. I think actually, doing it together and understanding what the benefits were together was so important. And actually we've all lent on each other and probably learned things along the way about future projects in terms of making them a success. I think what you can end up doing sometimes is having benefits in one area that, actually if you're not linked up to your operational teams, you can't then transact. So we've released some clinical time. What does that mean? Clinicians are happier, which is great. But actually from an operational point of view, you have to tie the links there. I think as well, and this isn't a plug for Damien, but I think you really leaning on your clinicians who are kind of enthusiastic and willing to go through some of the teething problems before you go out any wider, and doing it step by step. So choosing specialties where this is, it's been proven in other organisations, working closely with clinicians who are kind of good at this stuff and want to be advocates for this type of solution, proving that it works, getting your data, and then presenting it, to possibly others in the organisation who might be a little bit more nervous about using this kind of tool, and saying, look, we've done this is, and actually using again your leaning on your clinical staff and your operational staff to almost get it to the next step, I think is probably the biggest thing for us. I think if we were to do it again, I think we sort of ended up with so much enthusiasm for Isla, which was brilliant, that it almost became difficult for us to manage internally as a digital team, because everybody wanted it once sort of word spread, which is a fantastic thing, and sometimes the opposite of what we have with a lot of digital solutions. But there was a lot of there was a lot of kind of interest in it. And I think actually what we ended up possibly doing was whoever was loudest, sort of doing their specialty next and working through. Then actually what we could have done in hindsight was a bit more around where are the real benefits going to be, where are we going to see the biggest impact, and start with those specialties before they're rolling out. We've got, worked with Isla for a number of years now. We've got to a point where it's trust wide and we're using it across a huge number of specialties. So, it's kind of all good in the end. But I think that's probably, if we were going to do it again, one of the lessons that we take away. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. And in Harrogate, Rachel, same question to you, please. Where would you advise someone on the call to start if they're looking to start? How would you approach that?
So yes, it's time. It takes a lot of time at the beginning, working through the governance, and making sure that all the things that we want from our image system are the functions that the system brings. So we spent a lot of time discussing that amongst ourselves, what we saw as a benefit, and then we had a project manager who ran it for us, and she was brilliant. So she did all the governance and went through with a fine-tooth comb everything that we needed to do. And so we had weekly meetings, and it took several months to get it set up, but it was very worth it when we did. One thing we have done recently is we're working at the moment on a blueprinting for NHS England. So NHS England do a project called Blueprint on a Page, which is where you have a technology or an idea or something that's working in a trust somewhere across the country, and it's summarized into a one-page document, in effect, of how it works, what's the benefits, and things like the technical side of things, which I don't understand, and the governance things, which are usually important, so that if another trust wants to come along and think, oh yes, I'd be interested in that, they could look at the blueprint on a page and it's summarized for them, and there is some I understand some sharing of procedures that have already been done, so that another trust doesn't have to repeat the same thing. So that's the blueprinting thing. We're currently, we haven't quite finished it yet, but we're in the process of doing a blueprint on a page for Isla for dermatology. So once that's up and running, that might be helpful for people to look at. It should be done in the next couple of weeks. So that will give you all the information and what you need to get going. Another thing I didn't mention actually earlier on, which I should do, is PIFUs. So we use PIFU. I think we're a good PIFU user compared to some other trusts. We like PIFUs, and I think the reason we like PIFUs is because we have the system where we give the patient the information about PIFU, and it's documented in their clinic letter. And then if they ring up, they are then, like a bit like with the wound checks, they're then sent a link to send in a picture of their condition. So this has been useful for us, for instance, with acne, because a lot of acne patients are worried that once they stop their acne treatment, that their acne is going to recur. And we give them a PIFU to make them feel reassured. But what we were finding out with that was, say we gave them a 6-month PIFU, come near the end of the 6 months, they'd all use it because they were all worried about getting discharged. So then we started sending them a link, and then they would send their photographs in of their acne today, and you could clearly see, for instance, that it's hugely better and that there's no need for them to come in. So then we might then have a chat with that patient, or send them a message via Isla to say, this all looks fine, don't worry, there's no need for you to come in. Or conversely, the other way, a patient with, say, a blistering skin disorder, we give them a PIFU, they send in a picture, we think, right, yeah, fantastic, we need to get them in quickly because we need to do a biopsy of their blister before it disappears again, because if you give an appointment for somebody that's got an intermittent rash, and you're never going to get it if you just give them a standard follow-up. So that's really helped us as well, and also enabled us to decrease some of our appointments to telephone consultations, particularly for elderly patients to get involved in if their skin condition is pretty static and they don't think they need to come in, which is helpful. Only yesterday I was walking out of the hospital, and I don't know where you are in the country, but it's pretty cold up in Yorkshire, and this couple were walking in, and they weren't, I don't know who they were coming to see, but it made me think of them as they were walking in, and they just looked so frail, and we've got grit and everything all out, but if one of them was to slip or something like that, and if they were coming in for something that could have been done elsewhere, it just made me think that it is really helpful for people that struggle to get in, and we can deal with our appointments that way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rachel. And we've had a question come in. Rachel, can I ask you, how have you ensured that you're still gathering all the necessary clinical information to confirm that the appointments you've removed were truly unnecessary?
Well, we don't remove appointments as such, certainly without consent of the patient, and but we don't remove appointments. We gather information by the forms that we have. So with the 2-week wait clinic or the urgent clinic, the form that's been generated, which was we wrote it, and then Isla embedded it into the system, is basically a dermatological history, all the things that you want to know, and then the patients can then add in their images. So we know by reading all that all the questions I would have asked have been answered. It also adds as a backup to our letters that we write to the GPs and the patients, because it's all the information is included in that. So we can then use the same for acne. We have the same acne history. The patient can add their little bits in as well as the questions we ask. They've got a free text box, which is really helpful. And then you help clarify the situation. So then we have the photographs, and then it streamlines it. It just makes everything quicker. If it was a PIFU patient and we felt that we didn't need to see them, we would contact the patient and say to them, thanks for sending the pictures, actually I think it looks a lot better, and what are you doing with this, with your creams or whatever? You don't need to come in as such, and we wouldn't do anything differently. And patients are fine with that. I think interaction with patients is a real positive. A couple of other things functions that we use is you can set up a time frame. So particularly if you've got an acne patient that's just started isotretinoin and they're a bit anxious because of all the things that we've talked about beforehand, which takes a long time with isotretinoin, but you can schedule a link to be sent to the patient, say every week, and then they can send in a picture. They get a text message every week saying, please send in a picture of your acne, and then that will go to the nurse, and the nurse will then correspond back to the patient via text saying, dear Phoebe, this looks like things are going the right way, don't worry, I can still see that there are some spots, it's all right at this stage, or something like that, just to give them encouragement that the treatment is working, that they're okay. So we can do it that way. That's also been helpful for patients with topical treatments such as Effudix, which can get an inflammatory reaction, and then they worry that when they finish their Effudix that the area's not settled. So we can set a link to be sent to them at, say, 6 weeks after their Effudix to make sure that it's all settled down. So it's engagement with patients. I think patients like that.
Fantastic, thank you. And Damien, can I come to you next, please? And so your project or program is trust-wide, using lots of different specialties. What has been key to its success from your perspective? We hear a lot about different projects, and they have challenges to scale, or there are challenges with adoption. How have you sort of overcome those challenges, and how have you made this project a success?
I think in this institute, we are surrounded by quite ambitious and like-minded individuals who have the patient's interest at heart. It's adopting tech in healthcare is actually difficult. It's very slow because to make changes in giant institutions like the NHS is very challenging. The systems here do not like to be disrupted too heavily, despite disruption being a very sexy word in tech. NHS systems generally don't like disruption because they don't like taking risk, essentially. But so in order to it's lots of iterations required, lots of information gathering, and interested and enthusiastic individuals who can see the potential of a solution or a product, and see the impact it can have on our patients. And when you've convinced the right people that it could work, then we need the right buy-ins from managers, administrative staff, execs, etc., to support a project like this. And then I would say it's at the end of the day, when the patient experience and the clinician experience is good, these products would just naturally take on more and more, and the usage will increase if the product is good. What stands out for me with some company like Isla is their ability to make changes quickly, and rapidly test concepts, and make changes to the systems, because I work a lot with different EPR systems, different tech solutions, and a lot of these older systems are more cumbersome, very difficult to make. It's very difficult to get a change request in to improve a particular function. But Isla has that team, that the team behind the product actually is what is key to this. They have the talent and the developer skills to make rapid changes to their systems in order to to cater to the needs of all these different specialties. And I think that fluidity has been a real key.
Excellent. Thank you, Damien. And picking up on the word disrupt, we don't hear that word often, or maybe we don't hear it enough. Pete, did you start out to disrupt? And I guess the second part of that question is, what do you think contributes to a successful rollout to get to the place of being trust-wide?
Yeah, two big questions. Damien, thank you. That's very, very lovely to hear. I'm sure some of the engineers are sitting and glowing, whilst hopefully still coding. Did we set out to disrupt? I think I'd kind of echo Damien's sentiment there. We probably did, but not in the sense that, sort of Silicon Valley tech companies set out to disrupt. We certainly didn't set out to throw the model up and cause chaos and see where it would all land and then try and put it back together. I think in the NHS you have to disrupt much more methodically, because as Damien says, the whole system is set up to avoid disruption in order to minimize risk, and the consequences of getting it wrong are really significant for people, and have huge safety consequences. So no, I think what we set out to do, and maybe we're growing in confidence as a company, the more we work with people like all the people that are on the call today, I think we're sort of growing in our confidence to be able to challenge the underlying model more, and start to move more confidently towards doing this at increasingly big scale. So I would say we probably set out to prove the concept, and as we've done that across the country, we're growing in confidence in our ability to sort of disrupt and move towards a fundamentally different model of care.
Fantastic. Thanks, Pete. And Leila, can I come to you next, please? We have a question come in. What are the key misconceptions or reservations about adopting a digital tool in this space, from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think sort of, I suppose, user resistance is always the top one. So the idea that, you know, you'll roll something out, people won't want to use it, you know, that'll get noisy and people will sort of rebel against it. I think part of kind of linking back to what I said before, if you get it right in terms of starting small, proving the concept, you know, thoroughly, showing the benefits, showcasing what something can do, and you know, then assessing that against the impact that it'll have on people day to day. From our perspective, we haven't had a huge amount of, you know, sort of user resistance from an Isla point of view. As I said before, we sort of tipped the other way actually, probably over the last year, and we had more and more people really keen to use it. I think you've got to be mindful, and it comes back to the integration points, as Pete said. So we prioritized our integration. So we've sort of prioritized our community stuff. So our community EPR is integrated. We're working closely with Isla to then get our sort of inpatient EPR integrated too. You can frame it in a way that, you know, obviously it's not ideal to have a solution that sits alongside your EPR, and we can work on that. But actually, we get a lot more noise about people who can't onboard onto Isla than we do about people using it and it's not integrated, because people can see the benefits, people can see can see what it can do for patients and what it can do for staff and the wider organisation. I think in terms of kind of adopting digital tools, people often think that we're, you know, something shiny's come along and people might be trying to sort of put that into sometimes the simplest things and the simplest demonstrations, and again using your clinicians to showcase what something can do, can really change things. And it's not to say, you know, somebody went to a conference or something, got excited, and it's now coming in. It's actually needs based. Here are a list of issues that we've got, you know, within the organisation and nationally at the moment, and here are the things that we think, and we've now proven in certain specialties that something like Isla could support, and doing it that way round rather than a solution based, you know, and then trying to find problems is probably the two bits from me.
Fantastic, thank you. And can I come to you for the next question, Leila? It's, can clinical teams create their own PROMS questionnaires on Isla Care, or does it require Isla Care staff developing these?
So Pete might need to help me out with this one, but I think at the moment we normally create our questionnaires and then we send them across to Isla to do them for us. So it's all very clinically led or operationally led, and the content is done by us and we send it across. But Pete, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's right. So yeah, we do actually have a sort of self-service form builder in the platform, but the vast majority of teams prefer to, and actually clinical safety leads at the trust prefer for the team to build the form on paper, as it can be a Word document, and then that gets reviewed, approved at the trust, and then that gets sent up to us. We build that, and then we go through like a user acceptance test, basically, where we give it back and we say, does this match what you wanted? And as long as everyone's happy, then we can put that live in the platform.
Fantastic, excellent. So now can I ask you all the same question in terms of a takeaway from the session? If there's one takeaway that you'd like our audience to go away with, what would that be? And Damien, can I come to you first for that one, please?
Thanks. So my takeaway really from working with digital solutions is that healthcare is slowly changing. Other industries in this world, you know, like e-commerce, banking, travel, they've all digitized their services very rapidly, and healthcare has been very slow to adopt. But we are getting there, and I would say that we currently in extraordinary circumstances. If you look at our waiting list numbers, so extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary measures. So I don't think we can, you know, stick to the traditional model that much longer. We have to innovate.
Excellent. Thank you. And Rachel, can I come to you next for a key takeaway, please?
My key takeaway is very selfish, I'm afraid. It just makes my life so much easier because we're busy. We've got a busy department. We've We're always being asked to see extra patients here, there and everywhere. Having the ability to be able to communicate with patients, having the ability to communicate with our middle grades, and be able to instantly access the high quality images that we've got is just makes my life easier. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. And Leila, can I come to you next for the same question, please?
Yeah, no, I think Damien pinched mine, so I think of another one. I think it's probably one of the things that's already been mentioned, but I think from a sort of relationship point of view, having a close and open and honest relationship between, you know, sort of trust and supplier can make such a difference to the success of a rollout. It's probably underrated, I think, and actually some of the you know, openness and transparency and willingness to support when, you know, we're being a bit chaotic or we need something urgently and all the rest of it from Isla has been really, really invaluable in terms of obviously kind of the benefits that we've seen and keeping our staff happy with the solution. So probably mine.
Excellent, thank you. And Pete, what's your key takeaway, please?
Thank you. I think I'm always struck by whenever we have these sorts of meetings is there's so much motivation inside the NHS in you know, people like the group that are speaking today to make improvements and to drive everything forwards. And actually there's an awful lot of that in the private sector as well. I think a lot of technology founders who build products for the NHS are very, very motivated by trying to make the system better. And so I think my key takeaway is just that we're all really trying to do the same thing and drive towards a much more scalable health system. And so for people who are on the call kind of stuck in the middle of trying to get a digital project off the ground, and there's, you know, we haven't got clinical safety sign off, or there's no money, or any of the 101 reasons not to do something, I think it's just a kind of message to keep the faith and keep pushing forward to try and make a change, because you will get there, and these sorts of improvements are hugely beneficial for society and for patients and clinicians. And so, yeah, I just encourage everybody who's kind of thinks that they can see an obvious change that needs to be made to have the determination to try and drive that through. Because looking back a year or two from now, I think you'll be very, very pleased and hopefully very proud of the impact that you can create.
Fantastic, thank you. And we are coming up to time, so I'll look to close the session here unless anybody in the audience has a final question. Type that into the chat. But I'll look to close the session here. This session has been recorded and there'll be a write-up so you can read or watch it back at a later date and share it with your colleagues. And if we look back to the start of the session, it was about sharing examples of streamlining patient care, and we've clearly done that with lots of different examples and some great outcomes as well. So I'm sure you are all really proud of your work, and rightly so, because it's fantastic to hear about. So we haven't had any questions come in, so I just want to say thank you to the panel for joining us and talking about your projects. Rachel, I'm keen to hear the blueprint. When that's completed, please share it with us, and we'll be happy to share that too. And thank you to the audience for joining as well. I hope you found it useful. I'm sure you have. And I'll look to close the session here. So thanks again, everybody, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.